here, so I can change the slides. I think I can find the one that does it. Okay, so some of the issues to do with artificial intelligence and human rights, some of them are in the popular imagination, in films. For example, this is Deus Ex Machina, the movie where the robot realizes and wants to kill the creator. The creator is a person like that wants to create a collective hive mind and so on. And it's a very popular movie. If you look at this, is a robot in a supermarket. This is to do with health and how robotics sort of help people. This is a person that does AI for one of the big tech giants. This is military using algorithms to locate God knows what. This is up there some ways that we do data analytics, and that data analytics can predict people's behavior. And I will not forget, at some point I was at NATO headquarters in Brussels, and the strategic communications person there, working directly with the Secretary General, was asking me how do we use social media data to predict when there's going to be a crisis in a state. And that was a few weeks before Ukraine kicked off. So it's of great interest to many different actors in the world how we harness artificial intelligence, algorithms, data analytics to predict behavior. There's also, as you might imagine, a dangerous issue in the sense of how this might be used by corporations, the military and so on, what impact it might have on human rights issues. Now, what I'm going to do, because it is a rather very broad area, so I thought one thing to do is actually give you some ideas about the problems and the opportunities that artificial intelligence might have, but not stay there, and move to how rights-based movements have been dealing with this and what political effects we've had from fallout of data analytics and artificial intelligence. So this is how the lecture is going to go. Now, this is a great personality, recently pardoned. He was convicted of homosexuality and was only very recently pardoned. There's a new institute, the Alatory Institute, that has been recently inaugurated in his honor. Now, initially in the early 50s, of course, Turing was one of the people that helped with the Enigma code decoding the German communication during the Second World War. But at the early 50s, when people thought about artificial intelligence, what they were thinking about really was how to solve problems that were reserved for humans. So difficult problems that humans could not solve. They didn't have the cognitive capacity of the time, okay, the computational power, the computer to solve, but the computer could solve for them. And the example, of course, is the Enigma code and how it was actually broken in the Second World War. Now, some of the key areas that were identified very early on had to do with, first of all, perception. And from perception, we have now, in 2018, if you think about it, we have computer vision. So if you think about, for instance, Google Maps, right? The fact that you can see almost anywhere in the world using Google Street View and so on, except if it's a protected one for reasons of the military and so on. Then you have learning, speech and dialogue, thinking about Google Translate. If you have, and I mentioned Google because everybody has rather used Google a lot. So Google Translate nowadays, if you use it, in the last year or so especially, it has made strides in actually translating because it learns, it involves machine learning a lot, and then giving you good translation by comparing thousands or millions of texts. So it's actually learning. That's why you have this also speech of dialogue, think about Alexa or Siri or these machines that you have on your phone. If you have an advanced phone or whatever, they interact with you. You can ask them, who is the president of Nigeria? And they'll give you the answer straight away. Now, this wasn't possible before. You had to actually go and search this and then this would come up. Then you have reasoning. So how do we do decision and planning? And this has been happening. It has been part of our life, you know, like creating this quantification of everything, of how we're judged in performance at work, for example. Our performance is quantified at all points. Things that we might wear on us, okay, our health can be quantified, and so on. And then we have natural language, and this is where we go to robotics that interact with you. There's been many stories in the popular culture about different types of robots, even stories about sex robots operating in Amsterdam or whatever. So you have robotics used for health purposes or work in supermarkets, policing, and so on. Now, the important thing that Turing said in 1951, he said that once the machine thinking method has started, once we have taught machines how to think, okay, at some stage we'll have to expect the machine will take control. So he said that in 1951. And there are high stakes in artificial intelligence now. What are they? First of all, we know in healthcare that surgery companions that help surgeons. Right now we have remote healthcare in people that live in far out places where a doctor cannot readily go. Okay, so we have help that is done over remote electronic healthcare and so on. You have great advances in mobility, transportation and so on, for example, unmanned vehicles and autonomous vehicles. You might have heard in the press about Tesla, you know, and cars that will take you from, you know, sort of Seattle to New York, and they will take you by just saying this is the destination, and then the car will take you on its own, and you sit back, relax, if you're very wealthy and can afford it, I guess, right? So then you have issues that we have in that respect of mobility. The AI researchers talk about as unknown unknowns, because life, of course, is a chaotic place. So it's one thing to be teaching an AI to do something, and then that AI is in the wild, and in the wild things can happen. They can think, like it was recently, an autonomous car actually killed a person on a bicycle because it didn't recognize it as it was supposed to. So you have situations of killing people, drones killing people because they don't recognize them as combatants. They don't recognize them as civilians, so they are combatants and so on. And there's some very interesting stories at this time I can tell you about what was happening in the Iraq War and how British military forces were killed because they were not part of the communication network, so they were not seen as part of the multinational task force. They were seen as the enemy, so they were actually targeted. And then you have the incredible things that you could do with machine learning into simulations, right? So you don't have to actually, you can run hundreds and thousands of times the simulation to see what the result is going to be without putting lives at risk, so to speak. Then you have AI manipulation. Now, this is an area that myself and other colleagues tend to work a lot because I work in digital political economy, political communications, algorithmic governance, that kind of stuff. And what has been a lot in the news actually was the impact of leaks during the American elections in 2016 that might have affected the Trump result. You might have also fake news, algorithms that favor misinformation and so on. And then we have stories that, and I'm going to talk about those in great detail, like Cambridge Analytica, how data-driven you have data-driven behavior change, that you can actually target people individually. You can find that you can collect data about what the preferences are, what the addresses are, and I'm going to show you some of this stuff in the examples I'm going to use. So, in that sense, there are dangers in how AI might be used by people that, and groups and actors that want to influence how you think about an election, for example, how you vote at an election. Oh, I'll just stay home, I won't vote. But then you're targeted in a way, oh, my friend voted, this is an issue I care about, and this is happening in your timeline. So you get fired up and I'm going to vote. How does that happen? Is it possible, okay, that this data-driven behavior change influences how people, whether people are going to vote and what they're going to go with. And we know that it does. Okay. Okay. So the question is, if AI is basically, what AI is software systems. Okay, that's what it is. It's people writing software to be used, within computer language programming and so on, computer programming. So who is in charge of these software systems? And this is the question. And this person here, another giant of artificial intelligence in the 60s, his name is Norbert Wiener, a giant that couldn't find where he parked his car was. He had to wait for every car to leave so he could go home. So, genius comes with a lot of pitfalls as well. So what he said in the 60s, he said, we know that for a long time everything we do will be nothing more than the jumping off point for those who have the advantage of already being aware of our ultimate results. So if you know how to premediate, okay, an event, and you know what the results, you can, through machine learning algorithms, you can actually predict what the result is going to be. You have, okay, the ability to influence the future. So this is the idea here, and he says it in the 60s. Also, he said we have not the data to intervene after an event starts of that magnitude. We cannot intervene. It goes literally on its own. So we have to make sure what kind of desire, what do we want to achieve by employing this artificial intelligence. Okay, and so it is very important that you have some regulation, right? So if you, for example, nuclear weapons, it took ages for people to understand what was going on there. There was a Cold War, there was at some point a non-proliferation treaty, and the fall of the USSR. You have a whole thing happening. People understand you need some regulation here, you need some global cooperation. The environment, we have climate change now. Even people understanding that smoking is causing cancer. It took like 50 years for that to happen. So with artificial intelligence, it's really peculiar because there is no regulation. That's it. Right? So you're thinking, oh, there is no actual regulation here. So anyone can engage with AI, and there are corporation or individual, right? There is no regulation about this. Why is that the case? So that's the first thing. The second thing is the funding. So AI has been funded before the big giants, Google, Amazon, Facebook, Apple, and Microsoft. Before they came along, they was funded primarily by the military. Yeah, DARPA, ARPANET, and so on. Okay, so in that sense, who has responsibility? How responsible is government? How responsible is the corporation? Who is funding this research? What do they want to do with it? Okay, so and the final thing here on this point is that in many respects we are still in control of AI, but we have to actually invent a future with AI. Okay, collectively, that includes everyone. And this is the issue where then we go to what kind of future includes everyone, how does it impact human rights, what kind of awareness can we have about this. Okay, so why is humanity searching for artificial intelligence? So the idea is that it's for a better future, supposedly, right? So this is the idea, an easier future that will work less, enjoy more, whatever. It's like a utopia kind of thinking. But the crucial point, okay, that touches on the human rights in AI story is that what exactly is the human-computer interaction that we're hoping for? So does this AI need to work with humans? Yes. But we have the most difficult thing for AI and robots in particular is emotional social intelligence, right? So social intelligence is something like a toddler, is learning how to deal with their emotions with the person they talk to. They become social, then a child, and so on. That you send to university and pay a lot of fees, etc. So, but they learn how to do this in a certain way. But with AI, it's almost as if you start on the opposite side. It has a lot of cognition, okay, but the emotional and social intelligence is very difficult to program in these systems, okay. On the other hand, the AI has things like memory, attention, and things that sometimes humans have difficulty in sort of dealing with. So we don't have infinite capacity for memory. But now you have your phone or whatever. You know, if I ask you, give me a phone number for your best friend, you're probably going to look at your phone. You don't remember it. Although when you were a child, you remember that phone number. Probably if I ask you, you still remember it now, right? So you have like this problem of memory, and they have done a lot for us in terms of memory or computing power. But when AI comes forward and interacts with humans, they have to have some form of human values. And the question is, what kind of value alignment do we get there? Who decides on these values? Okay? What should humanity want from this future of AI? What kind of values do we want to have? Now, there are some kind of on the cutting edge of AI. The story is, what if we could involve humans in this virtual loop from the beginning? So they don't become an afterthought that we create what we create and then we take it to a research ethics officer and they kind of do a form and so on, and then it's a then product. So how do we involve humans from the beginning? Do we train an AI to simulate a human, and if they don't simulate them well, then we just punish them and retrain them again and say until you get, you know, what a human, simulate what a human would do in this position. How do you train them to do that? So this is some of the questions that are still unsolved. Yeah. So we have some basic problems, although natural language translation has begun well, voice recognition now really well, and you have a lot of time, computational time and space. We do know, for example, when players of chess and Go, you know, lose against AI, and they actually they lose at games from intelligent machines, and you're thinking, they think that this AI is actually human. They have an interaction that is very real to them. And also because of how some of this machine learning happens and it gets fed into them, when you hear translation and speech from AI, it actually simulates human breathing as well because of what it has been fed. And as I say, whatever you put in, you get out of AI as well. So the other thing that happens is that by understanding the world around us more, of course, this comes with a certain loss. And sometimes when people are interacting with AI, you have this almost like a fear of losing your own humanity, this kind of feeling. So you feel like you're losing this uniqueness of being a human being by interacting with this AI. Now, although we have these huge strides in artificial intelligence, what we don't know about a lot are quite crucial things. We don't know how a child is learning. We still don't know a lot about that. So you can have as much AI as you want, but we don't understand basic things like child development, brain development. We don't understand basic things. Also, we don't know how we experience human consciousness as it is. So it is okay. So that is another crucial issue. So you can have all this AI sort of business, incredible business, but we don't know how some basic things actually function. And there's some people thinking, well, I mean, to tell you the truth, Athina, I'm more afraid of natural stupidity than artificial intelligence, in the sense that we don't, there are people that engage with the world in certain ways that are quite extraordinary, and you know what these are, like racism, homophobia, and so on. Okay, so sorry about that. In my computer it all looked perfect, but when I took it here, not perfect anymore. It can happen. So some of the areas that artificial intelligence impacts on human rights, okay, and we see here very prominently these information architectures, okay. So we have had elections. An example is some colleagues of mine that were working in the Philippines, and I went and visited them as well, and they were looking at how trolling and paid trolls were actually influencing the election that got Duterte elected in the Philippines. And subsequently, of course, Duterte engaged in a war of drugs, murdering civilians, and so on and so forth. So you have like this kind of fake news. We saw this in the US elections as well, in other places all over the world. So you have like this issue of how can this algorithmic governance, how can these architectures be manipulated to get certain political results. Now, so that covers, I think, the second one as well. Now, I already talked about government and corporate regulation. So what we have here, I don't know if you recall this, if you saw it or not, but when Zuckerberg went to the Senate, the US Senate, recently to explain what happened with Cambridge Analytica and how they really made a mess of it, okay, he said, Senator, you know, our business model is we sell ads, okay, so it seemed like these people didn't understand even how Facebook works, that is there to basically use attention economy to sell ads, okay, for advertising by micro-targeting and so on and so forth. That's one thing. And the second thing that came out that I think was quite interesting was he said we are in a cyber weapons race, right? So as we have a nuclear weapons race, now we have a cyber weapons race. And this is an important area. What does this mean for humans? What does it mean for humans and rights, right, in different countries and so on and so forth. The other issue that I've already touched upon is how our research ethics are dealt with, and it is only recently that artificial intelligence labs have been taking ethics issues seriously, and that is a big and very significant, crucial problem. So if you develop weapons, if you develop, you know, robots and so on, what are the ethics there, and how do you proceed, you know, to program these things? What kind of committees of rights, of human rights, of civil rights you include in these processes? Who is responsible? Who has the oversight, and so on? In some countries that are especially authoritarian and non-democratic, and there is pervasive surveillance and censorship, okay, you have the government in charge. Okay. In other countries, there are corporations that do whatever comes to mind. So you have this problem of research ethics and regulation. The other thing has to do with algorithmic bias. So this predictive software that is artificial intelligence, the intelligence machine software, are fed what they're fed to have the result. Okay, supposedly taking the human error out. Oh, we're going to employ people, we'll have this algorithm that is going to be wonderful. So this algorithm is going to be so wonderful, it's not going to be biased like a human. A human that is motivated by all this kind of maybe racism, sexism, and so on. But the fact is that these predictive algorithms, they follow what is fed into them. And sometimes they reproduce the same biases. So if you tell them, look, exclude every address that is not UK, because that's what I've been doing the last 30 years in this company. That's exactly what they're going to do. They're not going to do something differently. Okay. Then you have the issues to do with the gig economy, and I will give you a very specific example in a minute. Because of the financial crisis that turned into an economic, social, political crisis, and so on, what tends to happen is a lot of people do gig jobs. A little money there, driving a taxi there, babysitting and so on. But these are resting on reputation systems or reputational algorithms. So you are getting rated, then you will get another ride and so on, and you will be by very many people rated as, will you be predictably a good driver or not? Will you be predictably from your social media feed a good babysitter or not? Are you a risk to my children? Is this kind of predictive algorithms that are being used are really cheap, and I'm going to give you an example in a minute of that. And then you have issues like that involve digital rights, data inequality, whistleblowing, examples, WikiLeaks, Snowden, the Chris Wiley, the guy that came out with the Cambridge Analytica, whistleblowing, and so on. And these have an impact on individuals specifically, right? Or the human rights of specific individuals that engage in whistleblowing, and so on. The final one, I mean, we haven't really seen it. I think there were very few cases we have seen social movements that targeting specifically AI. So we've seen, for instance, employees of Google saying we're not going to do this type of research because it's for the military and we don't ethically agree. We've seen people protesting, a woman killed by a drone in Somalia or wherever it is. So we've seen small things happening, but we haven't seen social movements that focus on AI, or on robots, we haven't seen this Luddite moment of smashing in the robot, if you see what I mean. What we saw recently, in France, we've seen people taking drills and Black & Deckers into ATM machines, for example, and so on. And the interesting thing about the Yellow Vest movement was that there is an argument that has been made now that Facebook changed its algorithm to combat propaganda and disinformation, and because it changed it, it gave more focus on local news and communities and so on. And an argument has been made that that made more communication possible during the Yellow Vest, and actually strengthened the Yellow Vest because of how people were receiving algorithmically on the timeline what was going on. So I'm not sure about that, I'm just mentioning it as a kind of point. Now this is an academic that did some research, and she heads a thing called, interestingly, Data Analytics Human Rights Group. So such a thing does exist. So our title talk was not that crazy. So this is a person that heads this group, and she wrote an article for, I think it was for Nature, Nature Human Behavior. It was a very important journal. That's what you need for the ref, by the way, private joke. And what she's actually talking about here is that machine learning algorithms are trained with data that encode human bias, will reproduce, not eliminate the bias. So this is part of the story of what these predictive algorithms are actually doing. Now, this is an investigative reporter. His name is Brian Merchant, and he decided that he will go and purchase, go to the predictive site, initiates a new scan, and he sends to a page where happy white mother and her pudgy baby gaze into a laptop, and the text reads, purchase more scans, you're one step away from making sure your family is happy and safe. So what happens here is you give $24.99, and if you get the 50 bucks, you get 2 scans, 1 free, and what happens is I give the details of the person that wants to babysit my children, that I want to babysit my children, right? And I can give them 1 or 2 or 3 scans. And what happens is they collect data on their social media that is publicly available. They don't even have to ask Facebook for permission. Publicly available, Twitter in specific, and also proprietary data that they won't reveal what this data is. They collect this information and then they give this person a risk. Moderate risk, high risk, and so on. So this reporter went and did that. His own babysitter that he has been using here for years, that's her name, and she actually returned her ranking of moderate risk for disrespectfulness, and that referred to some Twitter jokes he was making. I looked at the jokes, they're not that offensive or weird. And in fact what he discovered was that when he actually put his mother and grandmother, they go low risk because they were university, they were academics, and then a friend of his is a comedian that is on Twitter making really awfully provocative jokes. He didn't get as high risk as this lady here, who also happens to be black. He's the only black person in this equation. So he started to say to them, okay, how is your algorithm racist? He started making these questions. And what we know from predictive algorithms is that they can take a teacher in the US, for example, that taught for 20 years, give him the worst score possible, 1 year, and the next year, and he's basically made redundant, he's fired from his job. Then he goes back to his job after a year, he gets the best score possible because there was some difference in how it was basically some students in the test and how they were taken and so on. So these predictive algorithms are basically, we trust them, right, to give us the right result because they don't have the supposedly human error, right? And then you have, there's so many stories, decisions made about whether a person is going to be allowed, he was given parole or not from prison, Okay, so there is a whole business around that, the predictive algorithm, whether they should go out of prison or not. And then they decided, some research what to do. They decided to say, okay, we're going to hire an Amazon Turk, okay, random people. We're going to give them the information. We're going to pay them very little to judge it, okay, whether this person is going to go on parole or not. And the result was that these random people on Amazon Turk, in fact, okay, were as possible to get it right as the actual predictive algorithm. So you have these situations that cause a lot of different and significant ethical problems, right, and logistical problems sometimes as well. Now, how did I come into this? So I came into this, so in 2000 I started my PhD, in 2006 I published my PhD, and I was looking at conflicts in computer media environments that were happening before social media came along. And by that, I mean I was looking at Israelis hacking Palestinians, Indians hacking Pakistanis, that globalization or global justice movement, the Iraq war. I was looking at like things before basically we hit, the big time of Facebook and so on. So what I decided that at that point was that we needed some way to understand it. So I thought, okay, if we're talking about social movements or social political kind of groups, okay, we need to be looking at some of how do they use the internet to mobilize, to recruit people and so on, which is over there. Then, if we're looking at ethno-religious type of groups, say Al-Qaeda, for instance, or during the Israeli-Palestinian conflict, how do actually these groups, how are they affiliated, how do they include and exclude the other group, how are they using the internet as a weapon, is the internet used as a copy resolution, so if there's a leader that cannot go to a place because they're feared they're going to be killed by an Israeli mobile phone detonating a bomb, for example, can we use the internet to have conflict resolution, cyber diplomacy and so on. And then I was looking at what other elements we need, because well, we realized and it was realized at the time, the internet is not just a medium, the internet is another place altogether, right, in the sense that, but it also is a medium. So we need to understand who controls the information, is it censored, are there alternative sources, and this became very important, okay, in countries with heavy censorship, China, Iran, and so on, but also in countries during the Arab Spring, okay, where there was like this idea, oh, Facebook and Twitter and WikiLeaks brought the revolution in the Middle East and North Africa region, were actually, okay, the structural conditions were far more important than the social media being used and so on and so forth. And then, if you think about events like Abu Ghraib, the prison photos, right, these pictures that mainstream media did not show, but it came out on the internet for the first time, had significant effects on all levels of policy, okay? Because it actually had an impact that was representational for the international force in Iraq. It was tactical because basically they had to grab this, okay, very quickly, and it was actually strategical because straight after that they decided that we're going to have to do something about this because the troops are taking videos, okay, and they're popping them on YouTube, so they decided they had to create an international force YouTube channel and so on and so forth. Now, I didn't go on the first bit about the environment because it can get confusing. Now, when we talk now about human rights, okay, because there was a thing here, we're supposed to talk about human rights, right? Right, human rights, right. So you have, if you think about rights, how do we think about rights? So you have like, at the local kind of level, you have some basic liberties, rights, okay, universal rights, education, health, okay, and groups that want to be recognized in terms of succeeding from bigger states or have rights to statehood. And what happens there is these are at the more local level, right? So for instance, if you think about places or issues, okay, this is the symptom of the problem of having a nation state to begin with, because a nation state is built on the fear of small numbers, right? So if you're a minority, if you disagree with the social values of a society, you become people, the nation state is built on the idea that we have to actually get everyone, okay, as a nation state, to be purely from this nation and so on. So there is always this repression. So there are groups that have to, that demand on the local level this kind of stuff. Then on the national level, okay, you have groups, for instance, if you think about during the austerity process in Greece, in Spain, in Portugal, Iceland, the pots and the pans that were banging, and the 15M movement in Spain, and you have like at that level saying, this government is corrupt, this government is going for austerity, we disagree, you have classes, you have all this kind of stuff, you have the Arab Spring, which is about getting rid of the corrupt leader, Tunisia, I think of Mubarak in Egypt, and then think about the national level of getting rid of these corrupt governments. And what happens next, of course, you have these Islamic parties that are not corrupt, that are taking over because people think, oh, they're not corrupt. So it's not the Facebook guy, that was a Google executive that is forming a party to take over in Egypt. It is the Muslim Brotherhood after the election that wins, and then of course it's toppled by, further down the road, by another military dictatorship. So this is at the national level, you see that, right? And then you have the transnational global level, where people are basically saying, okay, this is an anti-corporate struggle, an anti-capitalist struggle, and so on, and then you have these assemblages. You have like an abstract assemblage that was, for example, the Occupy Wall Street and the Occupy movement, where you have concrete assemblages of Occupy Nigeria, Occupy Philippines, Occupy this, Occupy that. And you have like this transnational global level, what kind of rights we want there, and some of them might be about environmental movements, or anonymous, or peace movements, and so on. Okay. Now, different rights, and different levels have to do with things like, we talk about the labor process, we talk about what kind of agency do we have here. So if you think about sort of the first level, a human, is motivated, but an organization, at the further level up, has intentionality. These are two different things. So this is the funny question about the corporation. Is a corporation a person? This kind of thing. Now, intentionality is not the collection of humans being motivated together. Intentionality is an intentionality of an organization. A government, for example, is an organization that has intentionality. And normally what happens with government is there's a hierarchy, and basically, or in mass communication mode, what it used to be like, it was one television, radio station, whatever, newspaper, in mass communicating, transmitting a message to masses and masses of people in a hierarchical way. And people were not really often reacting, there's no interaction with that. But when you have what we call, on the level of techno-social, rhizomatic, more network forms of communication, what will happen is you have communication of many to many. And why do people get very, very confused is when they are on social media, many times, they're thinking that they're emailing somebody, making a point about the space of somebody to see, but actually they're broadcasting to a lot of people. It's a many-to-many situation, It's not I'm writing an email to a friend, the whole world sees it, and this is what actually gets you in hot water. Now, so if you think about the different levels, and I will give you an example here, is that you might have a situation, think about a pebble thrown in a lake. It creates this type of thing, right? So if you think about the first order, the local rights, and how this is formed, then you have the secondary level, which is the national, then you have the post-national. How they interact, these things together, is a very unintended thing. So think about, for instance, the yellow vest. The yellow vest start in Paris, and then they go to Amsterdam, they go to Belgium, God knows, they might go, and might have a European Spring. That is wishful thinking, but it might actually happen. Or at least it will go to the national level, where Macron is actually not the president anymore, the government falls, like it happened in many other places, Now, how was this organized and how it happened, and at what levels is this happening is very important. So this is about the rights. Now, the whole AI business, and I've talked about this already, does have political effects. okay? So I'm a person that looks at digital politics, that's what I do every day, okay? There are things we don't exactly know, okay? For example, we don't know how does a digital materialization of many people discussing an issue and say, let's go to Tahrir Square, actually becomes a physical manifestation. We don't know that, okay? We don't know, okay, whether actually this whole idea about, oh, digital networks, they're speaking out, they're going to give us democracy because they can't be stopped, you know, by dictators and so on. So you have like this utopian thing. The other thing, we don't know how they amplify an event, in what ways they amplify it. We're not able to measure it very well. We don't, and sometimes what we don't know as well is what is the impact of what's happening in digital networks on voting and campaigning. Okay, so we research, and there is this uncertainty always on how much impact has this had. Has Cambridge Analytica had an impact on the US elections? And we still don't know. Okay, but exactly. Have the Russian trolls with the fake accounts have had an impact in creating this discord among undecided voters in the US? Did they have an impact? We still don't know. Okay. So the other thing that we do know, though, is that this thing that all what's happening online is going to have a positive effect in terms of sustained political participation. We do know that this is not true. It doesn't mean that if you go on Facebook and say your political views and share and do some likes and whatever, that means that you're going to be collectively in the street engaging in political protest. We know that this is not the case. We also know that there's a thing called echo chamber effect. There's a thing called filter bubbles. So we know that there's an affective polarization, basically, that people encourage each other because they're in these bubbles, okay, and they basically reinforce each other, okay, so they're not in as much communication. We also know that the socioeconomic social attributes actually lead to a digital divide. So who is online and who is not, but also there are places in the world where you have the digital haves and the digital have-nots and the digital have less. But basically the broadband doesn't have enough bandwidth anyway to do anything with it, or places where you can only go online through Facebook, so therefore all your political news are gotten by what's on Facebook, and that's another problem, especially in some Southeast Asian countries. And the final thing we definitely know is that the state has ways of terminating movements in terms of shutting down, secularization, discourses and so on. Now, the big thing here is there have been academics that have said that online deliberation is divisive and is not actually good for democracy. There are people that actually argue that it polarizes, you know, the public sphere. There have been people for a long time, actually for about 30 years, that are talking, when I talk about networks, that it actually creates more weak ties rather than strong commitments. So if you are on a network and you're more open to have many different weak kind of relationships rather than strong affinities like people used to have, you know, for the party or hierarchical organization or Greenpeace or whatever. You have a strong commitment, that's how you spend your time. You come to secular society here, right? Strong commitment, you're not part of like 30 other different things you don't have the time for. And then there is this also this question about whether it actually impacts again political engagement or just that people express themselves, you know, politically, and that's about it. Now, in terms of political atmosphere, this comes, and it's a central point that I want to make here, which is the following. The Snowden revelations showed that we had metadata, complete structural data acquisition, metadata acquisition, which means that the National Security Agency in the US and GCHQ in the UK and another 3 countries, which is Canada, New Zealand, Australia, they were actually spying on each other's population, because you can't spy on your own population, therefore there's another country that spies for you. So you have GCHQ, yes, and so you have these matrices, okay, of Western intelligence matrices. And this happens in 2013, of course, revelations. And what happens automatically, there's a chill effect in terms of digital activism, in terms of whistleblowers, because if you map this relationship and you know who is contacting who, then that puts off people from actually giving, like calling a journalist up and say, I have something to say about this corrupt government, about corrupt organization, because they are known to have called and so on. And you can map these relationships in a certain way. So in that sense, you have a chilling in terms of activism and whistleblowing and so on. The other important point to make is that people are thinking, oh, you know, there's all these lovely NGOs and civil society groups, and they're fighting against surveillance, and they're supporting the whistleblowers and so on. But the reality is, if you look at some of these organizations, they are funded by governments and corporations. So you have like this problem of literally a triangle where corporations, states, and some of these NGOs, okay, are in charge of digital planning, and no citizen is actually involved in the whole process. Like citizens, we are not involved in how this happens. We rely on a representative government we vote for, or we rely, there we go. The robots are out together.
They're listening to you, yeah.
I think it's my phone actually. And to give you, this is an interesting one. So I don't know if you heard about the CIA leaks. It was called the Vault 7 that came out at some point. And the revelation was that the Samsung TV was listening. There was a capability of Samsung TV to listen to your conversation in your living room and then send that information back, right? So it's not a joke at all. Okay, so yeah, another point to make is this: these digital networks, and particularly social media networks, okay, they were built for profit. They were built with what people 100 years ago called enterprise association. They were there for enterprise association, not for civil association. What has happened though is we all engage in civil association while we are in enterprise association networks. And this is at the heart of some of the problems that we have here. A colleague of mine brought out a book this year called Oligopoly, and Alphabet, of course, is Google, right? And you can see these are the 5 biggest companies in the world, okay, based on market capitalization. So because they are, so Alphabet is Google, as I said. So you have the GAFAM, they're called Google, Amazon, Facebook, Apple, and Microsoft, the GAFAM. Okay. So you have these are the companies now that are putting all the money into AI. Okay. So this is the economic atmosphere. We go from the political to the economic. Now, this is, and I love this, this is making fun of Zuckerberg during the Senate hearings. So he's supposed to be Data from Star Trek. So Commander Zook, after his plan to study humans, created detail backfires. Now, the story actually refers to Cambridge Analytica. And some of the things we know about it, because it hasn't been researched yet fully, we're hoping to research it. Definitely I'm hoping to research it fully. And the way it has had an impact on basically, initially it was 80 million users, and then there was, because until 2015 there was a problem where anybody could actually harvest data and then they closed it off, and then it had Cambridge Analytica that was actually collecting, asking people to use an app, and they would using this app, giving permission, okay, for the data to get harvested. But what happened there was they weren't just giving permission for their Facebook data to get. This is the lovely thing. It was also their friends, right? So you just, here's my friend that is an idiot, and it has an impact on me. So there is this story about how many users actually eventually are affected, and new stories keep coming out, and they have, there's a lovely, I don't remember, it's a British newspaper with a chair that says Zuckerberg, and there's a whole hearing, he's not there, and all this kind of thing about charging in Facebook offices and confiscating things. That happened very recently in the last couple of weeks, I think. So basically the British government is thinking that if they barge into Facebook offices and confiscate stuff, something's going to happen. It's like during the Guardian during the Snowden revelations, the government demanded that that the actual servers in the basement should be destroyed, and they were there to watch people taking drills, so they wouldn't have, like, there weren't any copies anywhere else. I mean, this is like a government doesn't even understand, what is this about? To stop a debate, there is already all these copies elsewhere. Anyway, back to the Cambridge Analytica story. So some of these countries, that went through elections. And Cambridge Analytica says we're actually on their side boasting that they have worked, for example, in Thailand, in Malaysia, in Indonesia, okay? So you have like these stories about, we can help you win these elections because of how we analyze the data. We can target individuals, based on the information we have from their hometown and so on. And I'll give you an example on the next one. We're going to finish very soon, just to map some of the relationships. They're very interesting, right? First of all, who was the CEO? Okay, this guy. But the vice president of it was Steve Bannon, that was closely linked, if you recall, with Trump, right? You had this academic. He's such a naive guy, right? He's the most naive guy probably you'll ever meet. That is thinking, right, that if he does this, it's gonna be fun. What's wrong with what I'm doing? Nothing. He's also working, of course, at St. Pete's in Russia. So there is like this Russia connection then that is starting to be questioned, and the link with President Trump and so on. And then you have the same person is a founder director of the Global Science Research, and they are harvesting processing Facebook commercial by SEL. Who is funding all this? A hedge fund millionaire called Robert Mercer that is actually funding and giving donations to the Republicans. So, meanwhile, the Cambridge University denied, saying, we said we didn't want this, and he went ahead and whatever. Okay, and now we come to something that I think is going to excite all of you, which is about Vote Leave, the Vote Leave campaign. Now, the Vote Leave campaign recently had to pay a fine. How much was it? If someone can Google it, I think it was £165,000. Right? Great. Now, we're all, they were punished, weren't they, with £165,000. Now, what happened there? So the Vote Leave campaign got, reached the limit of £7 million. And after there is a limit, they thought, okay, well, we're going to start a Believe campaign for the youth, to influence the youth and so on, for the young ones. And we're going to donate this money, this $125,000 to it. We'll have these two guys that were in their early 20s. They're the ones registered for Vote Leave, right? So when the Electoral Commission was investigating, it was investigating these two kids. They probably, from what they're saying as well, they never actually saw or did they touch this money. Basically, they were actually the ones that dealt with it, and here they are campaigning. Look how innocent they look, right? Yeah. And then you have what was happening here. Now, besides what you can do with the custom audiences, okay, you can have existing customers email information. You can directly target them on Facebook. Then you have custom audiences that target people on whether they were browsing before the advertiser's website. And this one is the best one, it's basically people that were similar to the existing customer database. So this is how this whole thing was working. And what do we know about this now? People getting fined. There was this individual, I don't remember, he's very ugly, that was involved there. And on the Vote Leave campaign, he was fined. Now if you want, see, we're done, almost done. If you want some more of this is a great one. It came out a couple of years ago, where it especially goes, the weapons of mass destruction goes through the algorithm, predictive algorithms and so on. He's also a great guy. I've actually met him in a maths and social activism conference. He invited me in Uppsala, in Sweden, and he's actually British. This is all about what to do when you're human intelligent work. This is some work we did on the gig economy with a couple of colleagues from Italy and France. Now I want to show you something very specific. It's going to last for about 4 or 5 minutes to finish here. Okay, so let me see if I can get it. Now this is Elon Musk. Okay, now Elon Musk is, I think, it's like the 21st more important person in the world, 54th richest person in the world. He has been awarded astrological, astronomical, whatever awards from most of organizations, landed something. He wants to have rockets, he wants to get rockets from the Russians at some point, and then he decided, well, they're too expensive, I'll make my own rockets, and now he wants to create economics that will take everyone to other planets in an affordable way. He's the one that has all the cars that are driverless. He's the one that has a project called Boring Company that is supposed to build tunnels under Los Angeles, so you don't have traffic. No, this is happening, traffic congestion. So you enter the car, you get into this thing, you go on the ground, and you're 6 minutes at LAX. Yeah, it's all happening for him. And now, what is interesting, and he does also the solar panels, on the rooftops and things, on the roofs, right? Okay, so at some point he goes to this show, right? But with this guy, his name is Joe Rogan, and then he smokes pot. He's offered a cigarette that has pot, and he smokes it, and then the executives start quitting and all that kind of stuff. Now, there is a reason. Of course, I'm not going to show you this video to show you the point that he smokes the pot. You can go and see it if you're so inclined. It's quite interesting because he says, "You did nothing for me." And I'm like, yeah, because you are really high, man. I mean, look at you. I mean, you are coming up with all these ideas. There are 3 companies that are the most important companies in the world. I'm sure that this is not going to do much for you. So, this is, I want to show particularly 2 points. It's not going to last very long. 1921.
My question is, I know how much time you must be spending on.
It's already an extension of you. You're already a cyborg. You don't even, well, most people don't realize they are already a cyborg. That phone is an extension of yourself. It's just that the data rate, the rate at which, the communication rate between you and the cybernetic extension of yourself, that is your phone and computer, is slow. It's very slow. And that is like a tiny straw of information flow between your biological self and your digital self. And we need to make that tiny straw like a giant river, a huge, high bandwidth interface. It's an interface problem, data rate problem. Solve the data rate problem, then I think we can hang on to human-machine symbiosis through the long term. And then people may decide that they want to retain their biological self or not. I think they'll probably choose to retain their biological self.
Versus some sort of Ray Kurzweil scenario where they download themselves into a computer?
You will be essentially snapshotted into the computer at any time. If your biological self dies, you just probably just upload into a new unit. Literally. Down the rabbit hole.
Grab that sucker. Give me some of that. This is too freaky. See, if I
I've
was
been thinking about this for a long time, by the way.
I believe you. If I was talking to one, cheers, by the way.
Cheers. Yeah, this is a great whiskey.
Thank you. I wonder where this came from. Who brought this to us?
Trying to remember.
Somebody gave it to us. Old camp. Whoever
It's
it
good.
was. Thanks. Good. Yeah, it is good. This is just inevitable. Again, going back to when you decided to have this fatalistic viewpoint. So you tried to warn people. You talked about this pretty extensively, and I've read several interviews where you talked about this. And then you just sort of said, okay, it just is. And you, in a way, you're, by communicating the potential fear, I mean, for sure, you're getting the warning out to some people.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I was really going on the warning quite a lot. I was warning everyone I could. You met with Obama, and just for one reason, look,
Just
watch
talk
out.
about AI.
Yes.
And what did he say? So what about Hillary? Worry about her first. Shh, everybody be quiet.
No, he listened. He certainly listened. I met with Congress. I was at a meeting of all 50 governors and talked about just AI danger, and I talked to everyone I could. No one seemed to realize where this was going.
Is it that, or do they just assume that someone smarter than them is already taking care of it? Because when people hear about something like AI, it's almost abstract. It's almost like it's so hard to wrap your head around it. By the time it already happens, it'll be too late.
Yeah, I think they didn't quite understand it, or didn't think it was near term, or not sure what to do about it. And I said, like, an obvious thing to do is to just establish a committee, government committee, to gain insight, before you oversight, before you do make regulations, just try to understand what's going on. And then you have an insight committee, then once they learn what's going on, get up to speed, then they can make maybe some rules, or propose some rules, and that would be probably a safer way to go about things.
It seems, I mean, I know that it's probably something that the government's supposed to handle, but it seems like I don't want the government to handle this.
Who do you want to
I
have?
want you to handle
Oh,
this.
geez.
Yeah, I feel like you're the one who could ring the bell better. Because if Mike Pence starts talking about AI, I'm like, shut up, bitch, you don't know anything about AI. Come on, man. He doesn't know what he's talking about.
Yeah, but I don't have the power to regulate other companies. What am I supposed to?
But maybe companies could agree. Maybe there could be some sort of we have agreements where you're not supposed to dump toxic waste into the ocean. You're not supposed to do certain things that could be terribly damaging, even though they'd be profitable. Maybe this is one of those things. Maybe we should realize that you can't hit the switch on something that's going to be able to think for itself and make up its own mind as to whether or not it wants to survive or not, and whether or not it thinks you're a threat. And whether or not it thinks you're useless. Like, why do I keep this dumb, finite life form alive? Why keep this thing around? It's just stupid. It just keeps polluting everything and shitting everywhere it goes, lighting everything on fire and shooting each other. Why would I keep this stupid thing alive? Because sometimes it makes good music, sometimes it makes great movies, sometimes it makes beautiful art, and sometimes it's cool to hang out with.
Yeah, for all those reasons.
Yeah, for us, those are great reasons.
Yes.
But for anything objective, standing outside, I go, oh, this is definitely a flawed system.
Okay, so I hope you had a good time with me. Sometimes it's easier to talk about AI than the social issues and the impact of that, I think. Yeah. So thank you very much.